Okay, I'd like to just take a look at this schedule description of the program that's on the website, right? It's on the website, somebody was saying. Just a review of what we did yesterday. The establishment of the Hazrat Babajan School, the Hazrat Babajan High School, right? You remember those are different. The Meher Ashram and the Prem Ashram. The love craze on Mehrabad Hill, that was Chanji's phrase. Okay, the drama of Ali, the Toka Ashram, remember they moved the ashram in 1928, 50 miles north to Toka for 5 months. And the closing of the Meher Ashram, that would be January 1929. So the period of the Meher Prem Ashram is 1927 to 1929. We talked about a description of Baba's evening lectures in the West Tank Room, right? That's the museum now. That's where they began. And on December 20th, he went into basically seclusion in the crypt cabin, that's what it was called, on Mehrabad Hill. And he would speak out one of the east windows. He would talk to them. And we have that beautiful photo of Baba at the cabin that's right in the book.
You showed it too.
Showed the picture, yeah. And then the last one was a little bit I gave on the sources, right? There are the main source is this typed loose leaf pages in triplicate. One of them was with Chris and Christy Pearson in Miarana, which they got from Phyllis, which was sent to Phyllis Frederick, right? LA people know who she was. It was sent to her by Adi under Baba's direction.
I'm sorry, what was sent? I know you said it yesterday too, I missed it. What was sent to her again? To Phyllis?
Yeah, he asked, Adi sent to her second copies of all kinds of stuff in his archives.
Oh.
And the second copies were often better than the first ones because they often filled in the gaps on the second copies, but not in the top sheet copies. That wasn't so much true of this manuscript. Okay, and in the afternoon we got into the content of it, right? The governing metaphoric and ideational systems, right? There are 3 of them, if you recall. Ocean, light, and knowledge. So ocean, waves, drops, and bubbles, right? We looked at that a bit. Light globes, shadows, and reflections, right? We saw that strange astronomical business. And knowledge and ignorance. So, I mean, if you want to get a reminder after this about what some of the topics are, they're right up on your website. This is what I'm reading from. Okay, the other topic was Pran and Akash, energy and space, as the primordial dichotomy, the role of opposites. Topic C, I just mentioned it, and there isn't really time to do it here. I'll be doing a whole session at Mehrana on this, and I think a talk at the Mehrabad Legacy program next February. The 2 creation narratives, the one is the familiar one, the whim narrative, where God asks, who am I? And the creation comes out of that. You'll find that in God Speaks. Discourses has its own version of that, and other places. We don't see that here. The creation narrative here makes no reference to that at all. It talks about Pran and Akash. So one of the tasks, again for the LA group, to solve for humanity for the next 700 years is how do these 2 creation narratives integrate? You could take it down to Mexico and
I hope somebody wants to solve that.
all the Mexicans will leave the LA people in their dust.
There may be some correspondence when the clash happens.
Yeah. No, I have a whole wrap on this, but there isn't time now. Then we talked a little bit about mystical astronomy. Remember that strange business of the light globe and the shadow and the reflection of the shadow and the illumination of the reflection by the light globe. You know, we went over some of that yesterday. And then the elaboration where the light globe winds up having 3 shadows and it produces 7 suns. And we didn't get to this, but also 7 moons comes out of that too.
Are you going to cover that this morning?
No, we kind of dealt with that yesterday.
Moon too?
The moons is going to be, the LA loonies can become moonies.
Loonies.
Yeah.
Got it.
But now, we didn't get to the last one, so I'll start here. But I'm going to look at some of the topics upcoming today. So, evolution, the human form, and the 4 elements. The evolution of form and consciousness. And this afternoon, then we'll be going on to the next section this morning. The skies, or asmans, as a new revelation. That is to say, it's not to be found in God Speaks or Discourses or any of the other sources.
It's an infinite intelligence in one page. And
it mentions them.
It mentions it at least.
It doesn't really explain what they are.
That's
so when
true.
I was editing Infinite Intelligence, I did not grasp that the asmans were different from the planes, but they are. The review of the 7 skies, because Baba goes through them and says a little bit of what's in them. The 7 modes of knowing and the 7 degrees of bliss. That's a topic Baba goes over. Subtle physiology. That's the term used in the study of these topics. That is, the human body as a microcosm to a universal or divine macrocosm. The significance of parts of the human body. There was a little bit of that in Tiffin lectures too, but there's a developed 2-lecture series where he goes over that, the parts of the skeletal frame and their significance. On the human frame. Then the descent of Pran, these are the last about 4 lectures, which is, I imagine Cassandra and Sam and might recall, these are some of the most esoteric of all, the very end of the series. The descent of Pran from the 7th plane down to the gross plane, the bubbling of Akash at the boundary of the gross, and the architecture of the inner worlds. So that is illustrated. Where is it? Oh yeah, that right here. That's what this shows. That figure shows that. So those are some of the topics for this morning. Any questions here? So remember, when people show up, just tell them, oh, we just experienced the 3rd Asman, and I just can't tell you about it. It's beyond words. Wish you were there. Or else you could say I experienced, as we'll get to, paradise on the 2nd plane, and man, the coffee and the donuts. Oh,
That'll get their attention.
that'll bring
They
them.
serve wine though.
And the wine, yeah.
Wine and dine.
Unbelievably. Okay. So, so now to evolution. Okay, so since we see it, there we are again, right? Kripkamet, right? Which is now the Samadhi. In early 1928, this was replaced with stones. It was soon after this. So the basic Samadhi structure, and a lot of the stones came from the post office building, which had been down the hill. But, okay. And this is the edge of the platform, where it extends over there, and then the boys would be seated, and the window would be there. Let me just show the window again, because that's how this section of the book starts, right there. So there's Baba at that window in January 1928. And so we even might be able to guess the date, because there was a real cold snap. There's talk about that for a few days, and there's a blanket right there. So this might have been during that cold snap.
So it's a blanket, I was wondering.
Yeah,
Is that image for sale in there, or is that like, did you guys find that image? Or?
It's in the book. It'd be nice to have it, wouldn't it? Yeah.
You can find it online without the blackjack. I can send it to
Well,
you. I think I have it.
A lot of these photos are from the Meher Nazar website. Do you know that?
Another public. But
Under
you
the
have to pay
1920s.
for
That's where this probably came from. I can't remember. Yeah. Yeah, so this is what he would have looked like. This is probably daytime, not night. And he would have been doing it at night. So, okay, here's that astronomical business, which you've all completely mastered, understand to a T. So, so remember that yesterday we were talking about the opposites, right? And how the opposites are adjacent, and thus when you go from like the subtle being the opposite of the real light is dark. The subtle sphere is dark. And the gross, being the opposite of the subtle, is light again. You know, that was one illustration of the principle of opposites. Prana and Akash appear to be, as far as I can tell, the primordial opposites. This seems to be the pair of opposites from which everything begins. That's how I read this book. Maybe we'll find something else that contradicts that, but all the other opposites are manifestations of those two, as far as I can tell. So now this, in this section, Baba starts to get into evolution. There was a really important lecture in this series Baba gave on December 18th, 1927. So Baba would still have been in the West Tank Room, today the museum. And Baba called in the Mandali for this, which usually didn't happen. There would have been some of them who were involved in the work with the Meher Ashram boys, but he called them all in. And he gave a explanation of evolution. And if you get interested in this, there's an appendix on evolution dealing with a lot of specific problems. And there, I really document how this lecture appears to have been the source lecture for subsequent articles by Baba's in the Meher Message, in Ramju's 1933 book, and in Gani's rewrite in the Meher Baba Journal. Most people are not acquainted with this material yet, but this will be the next major book to come out. These are all things of Baba's. And some of it even found its way into God Speaks from this night, apparently, in the 10 States of God chapter that Erich did. So this lecture is apparently the foundational discourse Baba gave on some really important matters relating to evolution. And as far as I can see, Baba didn't explain it again. And as I have said before and will say again, when we start filing lawsuits against Baba's Mandali, dead Mandali, we can file one against Chanji for having neglected. Charlie, you'd be a good one. You could we'll undersign you. Because, you know, he didn't bring his video camera that night. And he should have. That was the problem. Because Baba brought a little cloth doll, and he illustrated evolution by moving the cloth doll in ways that I'll describe. And the notes are garbled, and it never got ungarbled. All these different versions repeat the same problems, even up to God Speaks. So it's kind of, people can make inspired guesses, and I imagine we'll get saints who will give us the answers in the future centuries. You know, the Ibn Arabis will say, oh, no problem, and then they'll tell us what it is. But until that happens, it's really kind of mixed up on certain really important points. So again, Chanji. Charlie files a lawsuit against Chanji for having left his video camera down the hill. We'll all co-sign, right? So, actually, I'll obviously I'm joking, but Chanji, we owe so much to that guy, man, I'll tell you. And if you can put it in mind, okay, Baba's up the hill, he's in the West Tank room, or later he's in the crypt cabin, and so he's dictating out the window, it's dark, it's getting translated, and Chanji is sitting there trying to take notes. So, I mean, it wasn't an easy job at all. And then he would have to go to his room and write them up in a clear form. And meanwhile, Baba was just bawling him out all the time. Chanji really got blasted by Baba continuously for everything and for nothing. So this guy really did quite a service. So, in fact, I would, if I can quickly find it, in this earlier section of the history, it goes on a night-by-night account of what was happening. Let's see. Yeah, okay, this is it. 16th of December. So the 18th of December is when Baba gave this lecture on evolution, but at a special meeting of the boys of the ashram, that would be the Mir ashram, in the dining hall at 6 p.m., there was a separate dining room. That wasn't the usual place of meetings. Baba gave advice on creating prem, love, not by any strain on the brain, but with a light heart and light brain, cheerfully. The love created should be prem pahije, I need love. That's a sort of a Gujarati phrase, so I don't know, it has a connotation that doesn't translate very easily. It literally means love. This is blissful love, Anand did. In other words, don't belabor yourself. It should be spontaneous and light. He was telling them, create love, right? At the end of every talk. Baba proceeded, now this is news, I don't think I've ever seen this before, Baba's childhood, to relate an anecdote of a pet doll, which he himself was very, very fond of in his early childhood. He indulged in this fondness only when not otherwise occupied in his studies and the like, which is to say that he did so during recess and leisure time when he would think of and play with this pet doll exclusively and think of nothing else. Baba's giving this as an analogy for how to love God. When you're not occupied, it's like you've got this little pet and you play with it and you love it when you're not tied up with other things. You see the analogy there? This analogy of the doll, Baba said, explains what he means by Anandit. Anand means bliss. So a light where you're always remembering the doll, but then when you're not tied up, you sort of play with it. You know how little kids do. You know, little kids would often have dolls, right?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Are you saying, is he saying, is Meher Baba saying, that we should treat our leisure time as if we were playing with a doll?
Yeah.
And that would evoke blissful love?
That our blissful love should be like that.
Should be like playing.
Yeah, the remembrance of God. It's like he's giving that, like when you're a kid, when you're not tied up, you're playing with the doll. In the same way, your love should be like that. You're not tied up with anything, but it's a light, not a heavy, serious, but just a light thing, and it's very sort of like your own little private thing.
Wow, that's very important.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
That's a clue. That's a really good clue.
Yeah.
And Baba said that, I used to do this when I was a kid. Had you ever heard that before? This is a little moment about his own life.
Yeah.
And I guess the key word is, it should be effortless.
Effortless, that's right. Light and effortless. He really stressed that to them. This is not a serious thing like...
I have to get up and play with this doll.
Right. Not to criticize the Jesuits, but you know, the Stations of the Cross, where you go through the agony of this and the agony. I'm not criticizing them at all. It was a great thing, but the love is not like that. It's light, spontaneous, natural, free, You like to do it. You like to play with your doll. That's what this love should be like.
It's beautiful.
It is a beautiful thing. This analogy, what he means by anandit, blissful love, right? You get the idea. It's not blissful like your God realized and you fall down unconscious like, Abdullah Pakran. It doesn't have to be like that. It's just, it's natural. You want to do it and it's fun and, I got to go do something, and you put it aside and do it, but then you come back to it. His lectures that night resumed on the subject of the 7 sons, a puzzle. But it's not a puzzle to the LA group because you've got it all figured out.
And you explained it in number 41.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. But now the 7 moons you still got to do because we didn't get to that yesterday. We probably won't today either. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why this section of the book earlier is worth reading for people with that interest. This will tell you stuff about what was happening. You won't see it in the lectures themselves. I thought it was better not to put this in with the lectures because the lectures are such a integrated series. But it's really worth knowing. There was a lot going on, and it's quite interesting if you wind up going in for that. So, yeah. So, on... where am I? No, I think I'm in the wrong place. Yeah, here we are. Yeah, so here, remember how the opposites are almost identical?
Yes.
Or they're almost touching. They don't, here's the figure showing that. They don't quite touch, but they're almost immediately adjacent, right? So the point of this figure, actually I think we created this because the figure was missing, but it's, no, it's not, here it is. So you see it's the same basic shape, and it's saying stone form and human form are opposites, but they're almost immediately adjacent to each other. And Baba often explained this as a Sadguru is like a human stone. That is, a stone is like a Sadguru is in that there is almost no egotism. And a human, ordinary gross conscious human, is like a Sadguru in that we have complete consciousness. The problem is, we have complete consciousness and enormous egotism.
That's right.
Whereas a stone has almost no egotism but doesn't have consciousness. So a Sadguru is the combination of those. In Infinite Intelligence, Baba kept seeing that. So you can see how that would be relatable to this. Both of them are almost at God, missing only one thing each.
In Farsi, we call it qarine sazi. And you see that in the Rumi's poetry a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He is using this dynamic.
What does that word mean?
Qarine. Qarine means adjacent. To each other, like you said.
Yeah, so you've seen...
And the combination, it is the reason between, like pairing them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this also gives me a feeling that the fall, if you're on the 4th plane and you fall, there's nowhere to go with the stone.
Right. Because
They're so close.
they're so close. Yeah.
So it's a small window once you become human to either go back to the circle or go up.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right. You can either go that way, or you can, which is not human. You can either go that way, or you can go that way. Yeah.
You rather go the...
I was at one of the LA Sahavas, the Bobby Moderna shows. Remember those?
Yes.
And Bobby had, I forget who it was, someone who actually fell back to stone state.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it did happen in some of those shows.
Yeah. It was quite a calamity.
Yes.
But he got everyone to pray, and Baba restored the person to human form again, so it ended well. Those are so fun. They were ridiculous. Okay. I'm sorry, I've got to just take a moment and get my clicker. I forgot to get it here. was that? Was that Charlie Martin or something? Who was it who fell down to
Could have
stones? Might have been Charlie Martin.
Yeah.
Should ask him. So he passed through the experience and could tell us about it.
We have to bring him back to the sort of playing words.
Yeah.
Where we can interrogate him.
That's right. That was such a funny, okay, it's working good. Now, this is from the lecture on December 18th, that crucial lecture. And the reason why I brought up the doll, Baba had talked to the boys about the doll 2 days before that, about Anandit, light, love, and all of that. And he brought it into the hall that day, and he used it to illustrate evolution. And this is one of the, our avatar has a lot of his darshana, his teaching, recapitulates understandings that have been there in the various great traditions and religions of the world, like that God exists and God is one, etc., etc. But there are also understandings that he gave us that were quite new. And this appears to me to be one, and it's a big one. It just sounds so, so what, but it's huge. And that is that there is only one form in creation, and it is the human form. And again, I bring it up, and if any of you know where anyone has expressed this idea before, I'd like to know that, because I haven't seen it. We have in the Torah, the Old Testament to the Christians, that man was created in the image of God. Okay, got that much. Human form is the image of God. This is more than that. Every form. Yeah.
Well, I think I've said this once before, but I saw in some book, it may have been like Martin Buber, talking about Hasidism or something like that, a long time ago, but they said, be merciful to your tools, because in each one is essentially, like a human form in it. Something like that.
Okay. No, I like to see, Martin Buber is the 20th century.
He quoted a Hasidism or something.
Okay. No, I'd be interested to know.
Like 30, 40 years ago. I don't know. I can't remember exactly.
No, there's the Kabbalah and all of that in Judaism. So, I'd be interested. These are topics that people can research. Maybe they'll find where some of these ideas came up before. But if you think how significant that is, even an electron, even a stone, is the human form. And why don't you see it? Well, it's so collapsed in upon itself. So obviously, Baba's not talking about something that is grossly visible, but to the eyes of a master, they could see this is a human being, like an embryo, just totally enfolded. But Baba even says about a rock, a stone, it has, a mouth, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 2 eyes. It's all there. He says it's all there. But it needs to come out. So you can see how this is pertinent to what happens in evolution. The evolution of consciousness and form is the manifestation of the human form, from latency to full expression. So the achievement of the human form after millions and millions of lifetimes in evolution is a glorious accomplishment. Finally, the human form is there. Baba didn't just say that here. Their mere message is there, and in God Speaks you'll find it also. And it's right there in the chapter on the sevenfold veil. So this is a really important revelation about our creation, that it's the human form everywhere and nothing else, in various degrees of manifestation. And Baba also said in this talk, and here's where, this is the center of our lawsuit against Chanji, because this is where he garbled it, the bum. the human form goes through 5 turns. 5 turns. You'll find this in God Speaks. And in the 10 States of God, and Erich got it from Ghani, and Ghani got it from this stuff. So it's a bit mixed up in certain ways. But roughly, so that's what, in the manuscript, there are many references to a diagram illustrating evolution, but none of the manuscripts have it, unfortunately. So we just created this as our best guess of what it would be. And Baba was, you see, illustrating the human form and the 5 turns with his cloth doll, right? Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning that, because that was one of my questions. In the book, in an area where I don't have it, just in the video.
Speak louder.
In the video, in the book, I don't have the book, but in the videos that you did and when we were reading, this turn is into double coat. So, and it's been used in several areas in explaining things about the skies and osmans and so forth. So can you explain if it's the right time for it about these terms? You just used it now.
Right.
Human form gets 5 terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just show you
If it's not too much.
very quickly. You see, this book has all these different sections to it. I want to keep alluding to them so that you're all aware that they're there. This Appendix 2, Appendix 3 is on mystical astronomy and the processional of the planets. This deals with certain questions that arise. But before that, there's a section on evolution, and this has a part on the 5 turns. So this goes over the topic as dealt with, not just in this lecture, but in other places. But it appears to me that this lecture is the source of everything else. And unfortunately, the same obscurities and confusions that come up here come up everywhere else too. And so, and again, we could just generalize our lawsuit to all of the Mandali for not having ever taken an interest in evolutionary biology. Obviously, a huge defect if you're one of Baba's Mandali. Because none of them ever, there are these questions and none of them ever raised it. Obviously, I'm joking, but nobody appears to have been interested in that. So these questions never got brought back to Baba's attention, it would seem. So there are a bunch of real questions that arise, and that appendix reviews what they are and gives some possible approaurs to some of them.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So Baba says that 8,400,000 times we need to reincarnate.
In human form.
Only in human form.
And in evolution, you go through 8,400,000 species. Species. So there'd be multiple incarnations within each.
So in order for this doll to go from stone to human form, all of this is there, and then we need to go through all these species. So species are required too.
Well, this is accomplished by forms within species. So 8,400,000 species, and you do several incarnations in each one, I suppose.
Oh, I see.
In God Speaks, it does say, I'm forgetting the number. I think it's a crore. Is it a crore or is it more?
Crore is 100,000? No, 100,000.
I know it's 10 million.
Yeah, 10 million.
It started with.
I think it's more than, I should know this, I should remember. God, I'm losing, forgetting these things. Might be 50 crore. I think it might be 50 crore, which would be 500 million. He says,
It is 50 crore,
yeah.
It's 50 crore, because it came out to 500 million.
Right.
Yeah.
There are 50 crore, that means 500 million sleeps of death in the total journey. So I would presume that means 500 million form identifications. So that would mean basically most of that would be in evolution. That includes the 8,400,000 in human form, but 500 million, you know, it's a lot more.
So does that mean most of us have done already 492 million?
Yeah.
Yes.
Almost there. Almost there.
They're getting close.
Of course, there's always the possibility you'll get to the fourth plane and fall back down. Like Charlie. Charlie Moore, not you. Yeah. But then you know, so then it's 100 crore. Unless you do it a third time. I suppose it can just keep on going.
I wonder if anyone's ever had to do it a third time. That would be a good question for next incarnation.
That's right, that's right.
But since we're with Guru and we're with Avatar, we don't fall down to stone. He always helps us. How about
Well,
that?
here's what happens if you're on the fourth plane. This, Baba said this, and you're abusing your powers. If the presiding perfect master is of the Jamali type, you know Jamali?
Yes.
That's the gentle, merciful, kindly type. He snatches away your powers.
Oh.
But if he's of the Jalali type, the fiery, wrathful type, he knocks you down to stone form. So poor Charlie Martin was up against. But maybe a Jamali jumped to the rescue and let him come back again.
Would they consult with Avatar? I mean, if here is we're talking about, because Baba calls himself a Sadhguru too many times, but
Yeah.
if it's done by those 5 perfect masters, and if it's a consciousness is not a soul, a consciousness is dropped to stone, would they consult with Avatar or they just do it?
You'll have to ask one of them.
I make sure I'll ask them when I see
I mean, I'm sure you've got a couple of them here in LA. As I was telling you earlier, I got a call from the Kutubi Irshad on the phone, and he sounded like an LA guy to me. So, who's, as I mentioned, his name is Hafiz. Hafiz is still there. So ask him. No, ask him. So this is a figure to illustrate. This is the puppet. So Nadia drew this, going through different turns in the course of evolution, right? So this is to depict in the original state, the human form is completely enfolded upon itself.
She's done an amazing job.
In the first
Look at the
turn,
vegetable
which is
wall.
achieved in vegetable form, the first of the 5 terms, the human form is upside down, head underneath the ground. So its mouth, its roots are its mouth, and its arms and feet, legs are branches pointing upward. Baba does mention here that there is a tree, he doesn't say which one it is, that has 4 main limbs, and each main limb has 5 smaller branches, and thus is just like the human form in that way. He didn't say what tree it is, so I mean there's a lot to be studied for people with an interest in these things. Then it coming to worm form, and by worm, Baba designated creatures with a tendency to crawl. So that would be insects and amphibians and reptiles, and then serpentine creatures, snakes, worms, and so forth. Those would all fall into the worm category in his account of things. A lot of Baba's categorization of the 7 kingdoms has to do with these things. The body posture is apparently important, and so is the direction of the eyes. That seems to be important also. So in worm form, the eyes are turned upward, apparently. So you're flat, so after being standing upside down, you fall flat. It's very counterintuitive to me, and I find it a little bit hard to believe. But nonetheless, the manuscript does indicate in worm form the human form is on its back. Doesn't seem right, but anyway, we put it in the manuscript because I put it in the manuscript because that's what it said. You know, I had to acknowledge that Baba knows better than me. I mean, you see, it's always, I want to say, it's always possible that something got written down wrong. I mean, that really is a real possibility anywhere in this. It's not a, you know, Chanji could have garbled things. That always has to be allowed for. As clearly happened with the turns here because they're kind of incomprehensible. But the third turn seems to be accomplished by the fish form that's kind of, he says at a 60-degree angle. I presume it's not that, but something like that, where the head tends to be higher than the feet. The two fins, you know, are like the arms, and you have a spine by this time, vertebrate. Then in the bird form, again, the manuscript is really, it's only one sentence and it's hard to make sense of it. But, so Baba doesn't really explain it at all well. But I'm guessing it's, okay, before it was like hover, I won't get on the rug at the moment, but you know, it head up, but then maybe it's sort of like this or something. You know, it had been more like this. I'm guessing, and then maybe it sort of comes up where birds do stand, but they're not really fully, you know, upright yet. That's a guess. Again, the manuscript is, the notes are very abbreviated and very garbled here. Yeah.
It seems like the position of the eyes seems to be significant through each of those.
It definitely is. So like a fish are looking up. Baba says when a fish is in the water, they look up, but when a man dives into the water, the eyes are turned down.
Yeah, we could see fish always looking.
Yeah, that's what Baba said. So apparently, yeah, the orientation of the eyes is really mad, and it's not always upward, it's up or down, it varies, it's variable. And he says the animal is fourth. Between the bird and the human, you accomplish the fifth turn. And that is a gradual, he said animals tend to slouch and their faces tend to be turned downwards. But through the evolution, by animal basically Baba means mammal. So it's standing up until finally in human form. You know that marvelous drawing by Leonardo da Vinci of Vitruvian Man,
Yeah.
that always seems so archetypal to me. Finally, you're upright in human form. So that's the fifth turn. And Baba also says, whatever on earth this means, that the first four turns are forward and the fifth is backwards or reverse. So I can only guess that you're somersaulting forwards until then. But once you reach the bird form, you know, you've been doing all that, and finally you reverse that way. I'm guessing, you know. Again, it's very abbreviated and cryptic, and the source manuscript is garbled.
Ward, we are doing some of these positions in yoga.
Yeah.
Some of these are yoga positions.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get some yogis into this. They might shed some insight.
I think we need some
And
dancers.
God knows why those positions are developed. It has something to do with breathing.
You know, I spend a lot of my time reading some of the mystical, philosophical greats, you know, of the Al-Ghazalis and the Ibn Arabis and people like that. And I think they're going to resolve this for us. They'll say, oh, you don't know what the fourth turn is? And Ibn Arabi will say, it's this, and we'll know.
Yeah, you're right.
That's what I think. These unclear things will get resolved in the future. So if any of you is like an Ibn Arabi, could you clarify it right now? I mean, after all, I was telling earlier, I got a call from Hafiz. Somewhere. Who's still alive, And he's a Kutubi Irshad.
Nothing less.
That's what he told me. Yeah, did you want to?
Did Baba say you come back just on the scientist?
He said with training in science, yeah.
Training in science.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe there'll be a highly developed spiritual science by then. I wouldn't be surprised.
You mean after 700 years?
Between now and then,
Oh,
could be.
yeah, it will be.
I mean, this opens the door to a lot of this. Now, here's another thing we learn here, and in that appendix I showed you, it goes over all of this. I don't know if you've heard the term Barzaks.
Yeah, Barzakh.
That's actually it's an Arabic word, and I'm not aware that Baba ever used it. Ivy Deuce did, and maybe Phyllis Frederick also, not sure. But it's a good word. I don't mind its use here. But if you use Barzakh, do know this, that in Ibn Arabi, do you know him? He was perfect master, regarded as the greatest philosophical genius of Sufism. But it's a huge idea for him, much bigger than this. Don't get the idea that it just means this. We have a very limited application to an enormous idea in his teaching. Yeah?
When you use Barzakh, what does that mean?
Okay, the way...
Is the word Barzakh or?
It means literally an isthmus, like between two bodies of water, a little point of land.
When you use Barzakh, what do you mean by when you use it? What do you use it for?
Well, literally it means that, what I just said. That's the literal meaning of the word. Ibn Arabi used it to mean anything that both separates and joins two other things. So like the avatar would be the Barzakh between God and creation, for example. He would use it in that.
So it's the catalyst, rather.
It's both separates and links.
Because I know Barzakh in Farsi means a place that there's no movement at all, you're just stuck somewhere. And usually people commit suicide, end up there for a long time.
Yeah.
You're not talking about...
It's nothing like that.
I thought it's that too, but now he says it's...
Literally, it's an isthmus. You know that word?
No.
Like a point of land that separates two bodies of water, but joins them. So that's what Ibn Arabi used it from. And I think if it was Ivy Deuce or whoever got the usage from there. So it's used in this context. So just be aware of this word. Like if we ever talk to, Sufis, it's good to know that they're not dummies and they have a much bigger understanding of that than just this. With that qualification, it's a good word, because the last species in a kingdom of form and the first species in a kingdom of form plays this role. And Baba made this point in the 20s, and he makes it in God Speaks too. Baba said they look both ways. They're oriented, they have a orientation and view of the next kingdom. If you're the last in let's say the fish kingdom, you have an orientation, a view of what's coming, and you also have an orientation and perspective of what's behind. And to play that role properly, you have to have this. And it's distinctive of these Barzakh species. Yeah?
The penguins are Barzakh between fish and bird.
Well, that has been said.
Yeah.
Here, Baba seems to say something other than that. But I don't know, maybe, I tried to, if you get interested in this, read that appendix where I go over a lot of the evidence that there is. Here, Baba says, the last of the birds, you'll read it, right, one of these lectures. They're on land, and they have a long piece, some flesh dangling from their chin. It's red. And it sounds like a turkey. And it sounds like a waddle. The turkey's waddle. Now, when you read this, you have to remember Baba was talking to a bunch of kids who might never have seen one. He mentions chickens, and a rooster would have that. So a turkey is the most likely candidate, I would say. But other candidates have been proposed. At the first, so we put that here. We put in some of these transitional species. The first bird is a waterfowl, and Baba gives the name of it a pankombi, something like a duck or a loon or some such species. The first of the animal forms is a kangaroo. The first worm form, which means animate form of any kind, Baba said, is a tiny little insect that's so completely green that you can't even tell that it's not a plant. It makes me, there's a category of plants called Fastenids. I don't know if you know them. They'll look just like a twig or just like a leaf, or maybe that's related to this, just a guess. So some of this is new information from this book. New information from this book is that the last of the worm forms is a tortoise.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tortoise is a bold.
Yeah. This was just in a manuscript. There was a little teensy-weensy word written in pencil, and they magnified it 40 times and spent a few days in dictionaries and found it. Yeah, did you want to?
Bob ever talk about evolving through like bacteria or amoeba?
No. There are a lot of questions that are going to have to get thought through. Yeah, that's one of them.
And I have a question. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead, Ms. Annie.
I was just going to say another good reference is Messages to the West.
Yeah, that early Messages to the West has a section, How It All Happened.
Yeah.
Drawings.
And that's independent of that. And Baba gave different information there that's part of the picture. Significant additions to this whole thing.
But can we relate that to this? Isn't it hard?
I'm not going to do it now
No, I'm
because
saying
it would be too
us.
big a job.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's published, Early Messages to the
Yeah,
West.
of course.
So you can stampede into the bookstore, and after berating the bookstore for not having creationist causes yet, even though it's not their fault, you can snatch your copy of Early Messages to the West, which would have this. So.
I have a general question. I'm sorry. So, when Baba got realized, do you think all that information came to him at that point, or like us, he evolved until he passed away and got a lot more information?
Yeah.
And so updated all that information, because this could be the early stages of his awareness, and then throughout his being, that's
it's
probably an ignorant question, because
it's too big a question to go into here. It would take us too far away from this book. But when the perfect one comes down to creation consciousness, they gain, Baba said, infinite knowledge of creation. So anyway, but we better hold such a question until afterwards. Yeah, like that. Now another aspect of evolution, I'm just bringing in some of the new things. I'm not recapitulating what you'll find in God Speaks and other places. But Baba also made this connection. And again, this is something we would not. By the way, here are the 7 moons here. So I'll just show you that much. So this is for the LA loonies turning into moonies.
Yeah.
Not Moonies follower, not here, but MUNIS, which is a kind of sage. And thus you can resolve the problem of the moons.
Yes.
Do you know the word Mooni, by the way? It's like Rishi or things like that. So Baba brought into his account here the 4 elements. So this is an important part of his darshana, his metaphysical account, cosmological account we wouldn't have had sure knowledge of before this book. This brings us back to ancient Greek and ancient Indian cosmology, both of whom had this, the four elements, earth, air, water, fire. Right? And science in the 18th, 19th century rejected this whole idea. That's a whole story in itself. But apparently these do exist, and they're okay, I could say much more, but I won't. It's too detailed a topic. But out of the clashing of Pran and Nakash, it would seem the first thing that emerges is those four elements. And we did include it in this diagram. See the four elements? Because Baba had explained it in 1931, as a matter of fact. So earth, air, water, fire, then, is part of his account of things in ways that are very interesting, and we could go into in some other session because it's too big a topic. But Nadia, we talked it over. She did all the work. I don't have any abilities in that front, but we spent a long time on all of these. So she's the artist here. We created this to illustrate what Baba explains here, which is, this is the evolution from stone through, tortoise, fish, crab, waterfowl, bird, cock, a wattled bird, animal forms, until you turn inward and arrive at the human form. So this is showing evolution as a cycle, right? Well, this particular diagram brings out is these four elements in their relation to this. And Baba goes into this in some of his talks. The early, from stone to metal to vegetation to worm, those all fundamentally have a link to the element of earth. I mean, other elements, all the elements are present everywhere, but the primary link is with the earth element. Fish have a link with water, right? That's obvious. Birds have a link with air, right? That also is obvious. And animals, by which Baba again means mammals, have a link with fire. And Baba meant it in this way. There's this constant fire to eat. Baba says they eat so horribly much. He uses that word. It's just sort of like, all they ever do is eat. And they have that fire in the belly. Baba doesn't mention it, but I would imagine this is applicable to the other gross appetites too, like sex or, and the other side of eating is excreting. I imagine it's that dimension of things. So in the...
Greed.
Huh?
Greed.
Yeah. That kind of, like that. And he brings up the elephant. We put it into another drum. Yeah, is it here? Yeah, of an elephant, because Baba mentions it. I wouldn't have thought of an elephant as a prime culprit myself, but he says, like that elephant in Victoria Gardens, that's a zoo in Bombay, he says, every time you see it, it's eating. All the time it's eating.
Yeah.
As if the purpose of life is to eat alone. Right? So that's the fire element. And the human form combines all of them. So that's another dimension of evolution. So before we go on to the planes, I want to look at just this one other thing, and we could spend a whole weekend just on this one section. There's really a lot to unpack in this book, but Baba, this seems to have been in his darshana, I'm using that word instead of philosophy, in his account of God and creation, a numerological dimension. Numbers seem to have a significance. And again, I always go back to Plato and Pythagoras, who were big on that. And now modern astrophysics seems to, for some people coming to it, some people say the prime reality is mathematics. You have people saying this nowadays. But here, I'm just going to read this because it's a significant passage. Now, what is the fun of all this? Baba has this funny language. He'll say, like the chap on the sixth plane, chap, right? I mean, I would say the awesome, great soul, I bow at his feet on the sixth plane, but Baba, the chap. Or Paramatma, yes, that chap. He'll call Paramatma chap, British thing.
Poor fellow.
Yeah, the poor fellow, yeah. Like that, it's this funny language. It's the Avatar's perspective. They're all, she's so familiar with all of them. It's really fun. And he's talking to kids too. Anyway, the fun of it in all is this. As we saw earlier, there are 7 inhabited worlds. That's these ranges of planets, if you recall that. The octopus diagram that has these 7 ranges of planets. He means that here. The skies are 7. We're about to get Asmans means. There are 7 suns, right? We went over that yesterday. 7 moons, 7 planes. Remember, the planes are different from the skies. Why is this number 7 playing such a prominent part throughout this story? Moreover, sanskaras, too, come in 7 colors. There's 7 colors of sanskaras. Why is this? Can you imagine Baba was just, talking to these boys, why do you think this is? I think it would be so cute the way he would speak to them. The reappearance of the number 7 in all these different domains is due to the fact, this is the cause, that when energy clashed with Akash, it acquired 7 divisions. So this is a big piece of information in this thing. And it's actually shown in this diagram. You may have a hard time seeing it, but I can't see it myself even. Let me see. I'll project it presently. Yeah, right here. If you get close, there are 7 divisions of energy in the 4th asman, the 4th plane. It breaks into 7 right there. How did this happen? Now, this next sentence is one of the most important sentences in Baba's books. And I'll just read it because we would have to spend a whole weekend on just this. But first, before explaining this point, let me tell you a secret. Do you want to hear that? Let's skip it. Should we just skip it?
No.
It's this. Each individual human being is a universe. And man, there is a lot to say about that. I'll tell you, they're really, in this book too. But it's too much to go into. Now let us see how energy and Akash involve themselves in the constitution of this individual human, right? Each human being is a universe, and energy and Akash clashing have a role. The 7 divisions of energy that energy acquired manifest as the 7 openings in the head, viz., the 2 eyes, the 2 ears, the 2 nostrils, and the 1 mouth. So, for those of you who are dedicated readers of God Speaks, you may recall that chapter 7 in that book goes into those 7 openings in the head, and it relates them to the journey through the first 5 spiritual planes. To the first plane, you go in through the mouth, then you go in through the right nostril, and then you go in through the left nostril, and then you go in through the 2 ears, and then you go in the 2 eyes. And at the end of that, you see the veil of God, right? That's clearly related to this. Also, there's a lot of stuff in Tiffin lectures. If you go into the one of the appendixes, you'll see different discussions of this. So you see the human form, the significance of the human form, and part of its meaningfulness is...
What if you're born deaf and dumb?
Yeah. Well, maybe in the future, science will read this and use it somehow. I mean, you go in through the 2 ears, maybe there's a fourth plane problem. That's related to the fourth plane. Yeah. Uh-huh.
There's also a story in Masnavi by Rumi that mentions these seven things that bring the senses to us. And I think my dad wrote about it.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to.
No, that'd be interesting to see.
Yeah. So Rumi has mentioned these seven.
Interesting. He was, of course, a perfect master, but there were different moments where he did say things that seemed to anticipate what Baba said. He was one of the most perfect masters. Don't do that, but he did. Okay. Earlier, we explained the first clash of energy and Akash created foam, waves, and drops, right? Remember that? Now, to draw more equivalences with the human body, energy corresponds to the head and foam. This is prana. You know, remember how it manifests the subtle sphere? Remember that? Well, that corresponds to this part of the human body, to the throat. Foam to the throat. That's the one thing we learn about foam. With this, let us put the matter of foam aside. We will return to it later. This is going to be the subject of another lawsuit, because he didn't return to it later. Coming to the point, with the first clash, both energy and Akash got divided into 7 parts. Energy, whose 7 divisions correspond to the openings of the head, as we have just seen, corresponds to the subtle. Akash corresponds to the gross, and its 7 parts are the 2 hands, 2 feet, 2 private parts, and trunk. So this is an indication of the significance of the human body, and it's really, see, prana and Akash comes up everywhere here. A whole new dimension to things that we would have had no idea from later books. Okay, those were the things I was thinking of in this whole cosmological evolutionary part. Anything you want to bring up before we move on to the planes? Anybody?
What is in the footnotes?
Let's skip it. You have to buy the book.
I bought it. I'm just waiting for the.
You're waiting for the book, okay. If you don't buy the book, this footnote, just eat your hearts out.
No, read it's creating the curiosity.
Read the book. Some people
Read
buy
the
it,
book,
never
that's
read it.
right. And read the footnotes.
Yes, yes.